Part 1.
You will hear a telephone conversation between a client who wants to rent short-term accommodation and a rental agent. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5. Good morning. Ace Accommodation. How can I help you?
Good morning. I'd like to organise some short stay accommodation on the Gold Coast, please.
Certainly. Who am I speaking to?
Miss McKinley. Sylvia McKinley.
Could you spell your family name for me, please?
It's MACKINLAY.
Thank you. And your first name is Sylvia?
Yes.
Is that with an I or a Y?
A Y, the old-fashioned way. That's SYLVIA.
Thank you, Miss McKinley. Now, just for our records, can you tell me what country you live in?
Of course. It's England, actually.
I thought so. Now, when are you coming?
Well, at the moment, we're planning on arriving on July the 26th.
Oh, the 25th. That's the last day of the public holiday, and it might be difficult to find something available on that date.
No, we're coming on the 26th of July.
Oh, well, that's fine then. We'll have lots of good places vacant by then, although you wouldn't be able to move in until late afternoon, because our cleaning crew will need time to get everything ready for you.
That suits us. Our flight won't get in until early evening anyway.
How many of you will there be?
Just my sister and myself.
And how long do you intend to stay?
Oh, only a couple of weeks. We'd like to stay longer, but we'll have to get back to work.
So, you're not coming on business then?
No, it's just a holiday. Why, what difference does that make?
Oh, you'd be surprised. Business people have different needs. You know, wireless internet, even fax machines and photocopiers.
No, we won't need any of that stuff. We'll be coming to relax and get away from all that kind of thing.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10. Good. Now, what exactly are you looking for? A house, a duplex, or an apartment?
What's a duplex?
Oh, that's what you might call a townhouse or a unit. You know, 2 houses semi-detached on the same property.
Oh, I see. I think an apartment will suit us just fine.
And how many bedrooms? 2.
1 or 2, it depends on the size. My sister and I don't mind sharing if it's a decent-sized bedroom with 2 beds.
Well, that makes it easier. And car parking? Will you require a lock-up garage? They're a little harder to find with an apartment.
We'll have a hire car, and as far as I know, there are no regulations concerning car parking. I think as long as it's not parked on the street and it's secure, there shouldn't be any problems.
OK. Now, I'm assuming you want something by the beach.
Yes, that's the idea. We want to enjoy the surf, sand and sunshine.
OK, but before we settle on an area and discuss your price range, I'll need to know about other necessities.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, do you want to be close to a shopping mall or the casino, or the fun parks? Or do you want to be in a complex with or near a swimming pool?
No, none of that really matters to us. But we'd like to have reasonable access to the motorway so that we can drive up to Brisbane to visit friends there.
Well, there are quite a few lovely small towns to choose from. There's Main Beach, which is north of Surfer's Paradise, or Mermaid Waters, which is a bit further south, or Palm Beach, which is quite a bit further south.
Mermaid Waters sounds delightful. Is it close to the motorway?
Well, not really. The M1 is actually closest to Palm Beach, and prices are likely to be more reasonable there too.
That's settled then. Palm Beach it is.
Now, if you'll just give me your email address, I can send you information about the town and lots of photos.
Well, my email is smac13@hotmail.com.
And one final thing. How much are you looking to spend per week on accommodation? Do you want something at the luxury end of the market? You know, newly redecorated, great views, all the mod cons?
Not necessarily. Could we get something clean, comfortable and reasonable for $1,200 a week?
Could you stretch that to $1,500 a week? I've got a property in mind that you'll absolutely love, but you'd have to go to $1,500. $1,200 wouldn't cover it.
All right then, but that's our top limit.
Good. I'll get on to this straight away, and there should be something in your inbox shortly.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2. Cut 2.
You will hear a member of the Active Outdoor Club talking to a group of interested potential members. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
I'd like to welcome you all to our Active Outdoor Club. I'll start by telling you a little bit about the history of the club and all that it can offer, and there will be a chance for you to ask questions over tea and coffee in the lobby afterwards. You'll also be able to pick up pamphlets from the table at the back of the hall, and if you wish to purchase any of our products, Bill will serve you at the front counter. As most of you probably know, the club was founded by Nick Noble about 30 years ago. He thought of placing an advertisement in the local newspaper or erecting a billboard somewhere, but it was the radio that he decided on to reach the most people. You know, other people who might be interested in outdoor pursuits. Just basic activities like walking or tramping. Anything active that could take place in some of the beautiful outdoor settings that this country has to offer. Nick was overwhelmed by the response he got, and the club soon grew from a dozen or so friends and enthusiasts to around 200 members 20 years ago, and steadily since then to reach a membership of over 2,500 now. You don't have to be a hardened athlete or extreme adventurer. On the contrary, it's a group that encourages friendship and fellowship through social and recreational activities. The club tries to cater for all levels of maturity and both genders. In fact, anyone who has the physical ability and a moderate level of health and fitness to participate in open-air activity on a regular basis. I think our youngest member is a 5-year-old boy, and our oldest member is a 75-year-old man. Of course, we have more challenging opportunities for those who are up to it, but all excursions are graded according to level of difficulty, and there will always be something for those families with small children. More about that later. I'm sure you realise that it's part of the focus of the club to ensure that our natural environment is kept as pristine as possible. We all have a keen interest in conservation, and many of our members contribute their time or give a monetary donation to organisations that work to enhance and beautify our natural heritage.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
OK, now going back to the grades of activity, first of all, tramping. This is very popular with singles and couples without children, but is certainly not restricted to those groups. Tramping is arranged for Tuesdays and Saturdays throughout the year. Most tramps are of a duration of 3 to 5 hours, depending on the weather and the terrain, and of course the time of year. You would need to check the newsletter or the website to find out place and time, and if you wish to participate, phone the coordinator who can give you more information. I'll move on now to walking, which is very popular with families, but open to everyone. And walks are arranged for every Thursday and every Sunday over the course of the entire year. Walks last no more than 3 hours, although the Thursday walks might be shorter. And again, you would have to check the newsletter for details of the time and area to meet and get in touch with the walking organiser to confirm your participation. Now, the Wanderers are what you might call a subgroup of the Active Outdoor Club. This group was set up to cater for the less active, more elderly, or families with very young children who still want to enjoy the great outdoors, but without quite so much exertion. Bear in mind that the length of these activities is variable, but we're always home before dark. Any member of the club is welcome to join in their activities on a Sunday, which include visiting some of our more beautiful parks and botanical gardens, beach walks, picnics, and even boat trips to visit some of the small islands off the coast. Often guided tours can be arranged if there is enough interest. If you'd like to see what the Wanderers are up to, check the website and then phone the leader for more information. I'll bet you're all ready for that cup of tea now. But before I finish, I really must mention something that can be a lot of fun. A great opportunity to form new or strengthen existing friendships, and a chance to explore a part of the country that you may never have seen before. These are our mystery weekends. The committee puts a lot of time and effort into the organisation of these weekends away, not only for health and safety reasons, but also to ensure that everything runs smoothly and everyone has a good time. There will be a charge to cover travel and accommodation costs, but apart from that, it's an affordable and exciting weekend away from the city. For more information, call the chairman of the committee. You'll find his phone number in the newsletter. So, that's all I have to say at this point. Please enjoy the refreshments, chat with the others, and feel free to ask questions. All the committee members are wearing large red name badges, so they're easy to find.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear a discussion between a tutor and an education student called Sandy about the student's dissertation. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hello, Sandy. How have you been getting on with your dissertation?
Fine, and I've been working hard on the various action points we agreed on our last tutorial.
Do you want to talk me through what you've done?
Yeah, sure. Well, we agreed on 3 main targets for me to aim for. The first one was to find out about suitable data analysis software.
Yes.
And what I decided to do was to look through catalogues specialising in IT.
That's a good idea. What did you come up with?
I found the names of 2 promising ones.
Right.
But I also thought it'd be worthwhile talking to a lecturer.
Oh, right. Who did you see?
Jane Prince. Do you know her? She's in the computer centre?
Yes, of course. She's the new head.
Yes, well, she was very helpful.
Oh, that's good. Did she suggest anything in particular?
Yeah, she recommended software called VVAT and said I should book up for a couple of practice sessions using VVAT.
Great. I'm sure you'll find them useful.
And, of course, the second target was to draw up a survey checklist, which...
Yes, you emailed me it last week.
Have you had a chance to look?
Of course. I think it's good. Very much on the right lines. I'd say your first 2 sections are spot on.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't suggest that you change anything there, but in section 3 you really do need to have questions on teaching experience.
Yeah, I was thinking that section looked a bit short.
Right.
And my third target was do further reading on discipline.
Oh, yes. I mentioned a couple of writers, didn't I?
Yes, well, I got hold of the Banerjee, and I thought that was excellent, but I'm afraid I didn't manage to get hold of the essays about classroom management. You know, the ones by Simon Erickson. The bookshop said it was out of print, and the library doesn't have a copy.
Oh, right. And I'm afraid I've lent my copy to another student. What I suggest you do is try the library again. This time apply for it through the service called Special Loans. Have you done that before? You're entitled to 6 books a year.
Yes, no problem. That's what I'll do.
So, lots of useful work done.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
So let's look at some new targets. We'll start by having a chat about your Chapter 1. I very much enjoyed reading it. Your written style is very clear, and you've included lots of interesting descriptions of education in your target area. I've just got a couple of suggestions for some additional work.
Of course. Could I just ask, what do you think I should call it?
Well, I'd go for something like context review. What do you think?
Well, short and to the point.
Exactly. Now, as regards specific areas to work on, I'd be quite interested to have a few more statistics about the schools in the different zones.
Oh, that wouldn't be a problem. I can get them from the internet.
Great. And although you did make a reference to quite a few different writers, I think you should aim to cite more works written later than 2000.
Okay. That's more difficult, but I can try. When do you want that done by?
Oh, it's not urgent. I should aim for the end of term. But in the meantime, I think you should also be thinking about Chapter 2.
Should I be drafting it already?
No, but I think you should note down its main sections.
Yes. You know, I always find that the hardest part...
I always find it helpful to put some ideas on index cards.
Yeah.
And then you can sort them and even lay them out on the floor. It's a real help.
Well, I'll certainly try it.
Okay.
When would the deadline be for that?
My advice would be to get it done before you embark upon the research. You can always change it later if you need to.
Okay, I'll get going on that then.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a
That is
minute
the end
to
of part
check your
3.
answers.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about the history of moving pictures. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Many believe that the story first began in America in 1877, when two friends were arguing over whether a horse ever had all 4 feet, or hooves, off the ground when it galloped. To settle the bet, a photographer was asked to photograph a horse galloping, and the bet was settled because you could see that all the hooves were off the ground in some of the photos. What was even more interesting was that if the photos were shown in quick succession, the horse looked like it was running. In other words, moving pictures. The person who became interested in taking the moving pictures to its next step was the famous American inventor Thomas Edison. Actually, he didn't do the work himself, but rather asked a young Scotsman in his employ to design a system, which he did. Now, this young fellow was clever, because the first thing he did was study other systems, primitive as they were, of moving pictures, and then put all the existing technologies together to make the first entire motion picture system. He designed a camera, a projection device, and the film. The system was first shown in New York in 1894 and was really very popular. Apparently, people lined up around the block to see the wonderful new invention. There were, however, a couple of problems with the system. The camera weighed over 200 kilograms, and only one person at a time could see the film. Well now, news of the new system in America traveled fast, and a number of rival European systems started to appear once people had heard about it. The single problem with all the systems was they couldn't really project the film onto a screen, so more than one person could see it. Then in 1895, 3 systems were all developed, more or less at the same time and independently of each other. I guess the most famous of these was by the Lumière brothers from France, and they called their system the cinematograph, which of course is where the word cinema comes from. There were also 2 brothers in Germany who developed a successful system, and they called it a bioscope. Well, now once the problem of projection had been solved, the next challenge for the inventors was to make the films longer and more interesting. A continuing problem at the time was that the films had a tendency to break when they were being played, a problem which was caused by the tension between the two wheels, or reels as they are called, which hold the film. Now, this problem was solved by two American brothers. They developed the Lantham loop, which was the simple addition of a third reel between the two main reels, and this took all the tension away, with the result that the film stopped snapping. So now there was a real possibility of having films of more than 2 or 3 minutes. And this led to the making of the Great Train Robbery, the very first movie made. It only lasted 11 minutes, but was an absolute sensation, and there were cases of people watching the movie and actually fainting when the character fired a gun at the camera. Almost overnight, movies became a craze, and by 1905, people in America were lining up to see movies in store theaters, as they were called then. I guess the next big step in terms of development of technology was to have people actually talking on the film. And the first step towards this was in 1926, when sound effects were first used on a film. It wasn't until the following year, however, that the first talkie, as they were called then, was made. This film featured actors speaking only during parts of the film, and was called The Jazz Singer. And it wasn't until 1928 that the first all-talking film was produced, and this was called The Lights of New York. Unfortunately, the sound on this early film was not very good, and I believe they put subtitles on the film. That is, they printed the dialogue along the bottom of the film to compensate for this poor sound quality. Now, with the addition of sound, moving pictures became far more difficult to make.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Yeah. Sometimes I get so mad, there's no controlling me. My thoughts get so bad, I'm like, I might grab a bat, I don't know. My wrath, my blood boils over like, oh God, here goes. I lost all feeling from my head to my toes. You said some shit that I can't let go, so just stay tuned for the rest of the show. So have you ever felt betrayed? Switches how you see things, realize something needs